You've just installed Unity, hit that new project button, so where to from here? Well, I've been writing games for the past 7 years, and since January of 2023, I've been doing it full time. And I've never had more fun. I'm gonna tell you how I would have, and probably should have, started learning Unity. I know learning game dev can feel very overwhelming, so I'm gonna break it down for you into 5 steps that you can follow to make it much easier to get started. Also, a lot of you starting game development right now have pretty much a cheat code on your hands. So I'll tell you more about that as well. Stick around and you'll be making your own games in no time. Trust me, it's worth it. Firstly, I would have started with a 2D game. My goal was always to make 3D games. I don't really play too many 2D games, so naturally it would make sense for me to dive right into 3D game development, right? Wrong. This was a bad decision. Starting with a small 2D game will give you a good foundation without overwhelming you with all of the additional functionality that comes with writing a 3D game. The ideal first project is Flappy Bird. Let me tell you why, and I'll also share my favorite Flappy Bird tutorial on YouTube. Learning how to make Flappy Bird is going to teach you how to use the keyboard for user input. It will teach you how to handle the camera and physics like gravity or applying a force to the character to make it move up and flap its wings. It will teach you how to use sprites for the graphics and animation. And finally, you will learn to write some C# code. Don't be scared though, coding is very easy when you learn its 5 essential parts. Learn what a variable is. Learn what a function is, learn what a class is, learn what an if statement is, and learn what a for loop is. If you spend some time learning these 5 components, you will be able to program pretty much anything. And that cheat code I mentioned earlier will really come in handy with this one. Use ChatGPT, but not to write your code, but rather to explain concepts that you are too afraid to ask anybody else to explain. Yes, it can be wonky at times, but it's actually really good at explaining concepts like what is a variable in C#. If I had ChatGPT when I started out, I would have taken full advantage of it, to such a level that I would have asked it to explain to me what a word like sprite means in the context of game development. Often we feel like we're struggling to understand a concept when really we're just struggling to understand the terminology used to describe the concept. Anyway, Ziguos, I think I pronounced that right, has an amazing 1-hour-long tutorial on creating Flappy Bird from scratch in Unity. So you should really check that one out to help you get started. Secondly, I would try to write Flappy Bird, but this time without the tutorial. Something you need to understand about game development or software development as a whole is that there are very few people who can write an entire game or application without reading some documentation, Googling some terminology, or even watching a video to help them refresh their memory on a concept. If you believe that doing any of these things will have you stuck in some tutorial hell, you're gonna have a very hard time finishing any projects. But what I would aim to do is get better at using the material available to me to help me solve my problems. What I mean by this is, I don't particularly want to scrub through an hour-long video trying to figure out why my bird is not colliding with my pipes. Instead, I would want to get used to using Unity's documentation, which will describe exactly what I need to know, and I can read it in the space of 5 minutes. And if there was anything I didn't really understand from Unity's documentation, I would ask ChatGPT to help me to break it down. Thirdly, I would then join my first game jam. A game jam is an event where you have a set amount of time and a theme that you need to create a game around. The theme is usually decided by the host of the game jam. Why a game jam? Well, firstly, it would force me to use what I learned making Flappy Bird to create a new mechanic. I would aim to create just one new mechanic. Whether it's a grapple hook or a dash, I would just try to make one mechanic. And that's because game jams will teach you a very hard lesson, and that is how long it takes you to make different types of games and mechanics. Scoping a game is one of the hardest things that there is to learn about game development. And when you have only 2 weeks to make a game, for example, you'll find yourself in the last couple of days scrapping new mechanics that you thought you wanted to add, simply because you don't have enough time to make them. And the last thing about doing a game jam is that you will get to understand just how good it feels to release a game for other people to play. On top of that, there's not really much pressure because nobody's expecting a game jam game to function well, or sometimes they don't even function at all. But the idea is that some people will be able to test out a new mechanic that you've wanted to implement for the longest time. A game jam is more meant to test the potential of an idea, and nobody's expecting a masterpiece. And trust me, once you've felt that addictive feeling of pushing the publish button for one of your games, you will have so much motivation to get started on your next game. Fourthly, because I want to learn how to make 3D games, like They Come in Waves, which is my indie game, I would really appreciate it if you could add it to your wishlist on Steam. I would then go ahead and download Unity's FPS Micro Game project, which is a full FPS game with a fully functioning character controller and enemies. This is going to be the biggest learning curve, but that's okay because you will have a solid foundation from all of the previous projects that you had just done. Unity also has a really good tutorial on setting the FPS Micro Game project up. The code is also very well structured with comments everywhere, so it's really easy to learn from. The biggest things I would try to understand from this project though is how the player moves around and how the camera is following the player, how the guns are set up to aim down sight and switch between different weapons. Take your time with this. Ask ChatGPT loads of questions, and if you don't get the answers that you're looking for from ChatGPT, post questions on the Unity forums or in the Unity Discord. People are very helpful out there and they will try to do their best to give you the answer you're looking for. Either way, working on this will give you a really good idea of how 3D games are set up in Unity. Finally, what I would try to do is add my own gun and my own enemy to the FPS Micro Game project. At this point, you're not trying to learn 3D modeling, so I would try to download a model from the Unity Asset Store or somewhere off the internet. The lesson here would be in learning how to interact with external components and bring them into your project. How to work with a gun model and an enemy model and put them into your own world. I think once you've figured out how to do that, and if you manage to add a new weapon to your player and a new enemy to the world, you will have such a solid foundation to move forward and start creating your own project. Remember to try and keep them small though. I think a lot of people fall short and end up giving up on their game dev journey because they scope their first project way too big, and then they get demoralized when they feel like they're not making any progress. So for the first couple, keep it small. Keep your motivation up and keep making games. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and please don't forget to add They Come in Waves to your wishlist. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.